The manila envelope sat on the granite kitchen island, bleeding a ring of condensation from the iced coffee I had carelessly set beside it. 9 pages of dense, bureaucratic text. That was all it took to dismantle a decade of blind devotion. I stared at the crisp white edges, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, feeling the precise moment my entire adult life fractured into a before and an after. We are conditioned to believe that love is a reward for persistence. We watch movies where the quiet guy in the background waits out the bad boyfriends, offers a steady hand, and eventually wins the girl, transitioning seamlessly into a montage of golden hour bliss. But reality doesn't care about your patience. Reality operates on facts, biology, and the cruel mathematics of time. I had known Alina since the ink was wet on our high school yearbooks. She was the kind of girl who moved through the hallways enveloped in an aura of vanilla perfume and effortless grace. I spent my teenage years in a state of quiet orbit around her, carrying her textbooks, listening to her complain about the boys who treated her poorly, and absorbing her tears like a deeply tragic sponge. I convinced myself that this was nobility. I thought my silent, unyielding availability was a virtue. It took 10 years for the stars to align. We collided at a crowded downtown coffee shop, both 28, both carrying the invisible bruises of our 20s. The transition from platonic anchors to lovers felt less like a spark and more like a landslide. The first few weeks were an intoxicating blur of tangled bedsheets, late-night confessions, and the surreal, dizzying triumph of finally holding the woman I had idolized for a third of my life. I was drunk on the validation. I thought I had finally cashed in the karma I'd been saving since I was 16. Less than 2 months into this euphoric haze, the music stopped. I came home from my shift at the architectural firm to find Alina sitting on the edge of my bathtub, staring blankly at the hexagonal floor tiles. Between her trembling fingers rested a slender plastic wand, bearing 2 unmistakable, damning pink lines. The air in the bathroom felt instantly heavier, thick with the scent of damp towels and sudden, inescapable gravity. She wept, pressing her face into my chest, murmuring apologies and fears about her career, her parents, the sheer impossibility of the situation. I didn't panic, I didn't question it. Instead, my long-dormant savior complex roared to life. This was my moment to prove my worth, to demonstrate the unshakable foundation of my character. I smoothed her hair, kissed the crown of her head, and promised her that everything would be fine. When I broke the news to my mother, Beatrice, she didn't offer congratulations or ask how I felt. She merely set her teacup down with a sharp porcelain clink, her eyes narrowing with generational pragmatism. "You do the right thing, Silas," she instructed, her voice brokering no argument. "You start planning the wedding. A child needs a name and a family needs a foundation." I obeyed. We orchestrated a shotgun wedding in the span of 3 weeks. It was a chaotic blur of rented folding chairs, rushed floral arrangements that smelled faintly of a hospital lobby, and a courthouse official who mispronounced my last name. I stood at the altar in a suit that felt one size too small, binding myself to a woman I had barely begun to date, driven entirely by a perceived moral obligation. The subsequent months were a grueling test of endurance. I took on weekend freelance drafting projects to build a financial cushion. I spent my evenings assembling Scandinavian cribs with blistered fingers and painting the spare bedroom a muted, gender-neutral sage. I was operating on adrenaline and duty, burying the faint, persistent whisper in the back of my mind, the whisper that told me the math felt slightly off. Little Leo arrived on a rain-slicked Tuesday in November. Holding him in the sterile, fluorescent-lit maternity ward, I felt a profound, terrifying rush of protective instinct. But it was later that evening, while Alina slept off the exhaustion of labor, that the whisper turned into a scream. I was reviewing the discharge paperwork, flipping through the medical charts to ensure I had the right insurance forms. My eyes snagged on the pediatrician's notes regarding the gestational age. I stared at the numbers. I counted backward on my fingers, feeling incredibly stupid, then pulled up the calendar on my phone. According to the medical records, conception had occurred roughly 3 weeks before Elena, and I had reconnected at that coffee shop. A cold metallic dread pooled in my stomach. I tried to rationalize it. Ultrasounds can be wrong, babies grow at different rates, premature births happen, but Leo was 8 pounds, perfectly healthy with a full head of dark hair. I spent the next 4 weeks living in a state of suspended animation, smiling for the relatives, changing diapers, warming bottles at 3 in the morning, all while a corrosive acid of suspicion chewed through my insides. The uncertainty became a physical weight. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I finally ordered a discreet DNA testing kit online, feeling like a traitor as I entered my credit card information. The kit arrived in a plain brown box. Waiting until Elena was out having coffee with her sister, I stood over Leo's crib. He was sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling in rhythmic perfection. My hands shook as I tore open the sterile packaging. Swabbing the inside of an infant's cheek feels like a violation, a betrayal of the innocence radiating from the crib. I sealed the vials, mailed the package, and entered a purgatory of waiting. 10 days later, the email notification chimed on my phone. I opened the attached PDF. I didn't need to read the scientific jargon or decipher the genetic markers. I just looked at the bolded percentage at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity, 0.0%. The numbers didn't blur. I didn't cry. Instead, an eerie, crystalline clarity washed over me. The decade of pining, the rushed wedding, the exhaustion, the financial drain, it had all been a subsidy for another man's ghost. Elena hadn't chosen me because she suddenly recognized my inherent value. She had chosen me because she was terrified, pregnant, and I was the most reliable, easily manipulated safety net in her immediate vicinity. I was a life raft, nothing more. I printed the results, sliding the 9 pages into a manila envelope. I didn't say a word to Elena that evening. I helped her bathe the baby. I kissed her forehead before bed. I let the silence stretch until Sunday. Sunday dinners at Elena's parents' house were an immovable tradition. Her father, Richard, was a booming, jovial man who carved the roast beef with theatrical flair, while her mother, Martha, hovered anxiously over the gravy boat. The dining room was suffocatingly warm, smelling of roasted rosemary and old wood polish. The crystal wine glasses chimed as we toasted to the new family. I waited until the plates were cleared and Martha was pouring the coffee. The casual chatter drifted toward Leo's sleeping schedule and preschool districts. "Pass the cream, would you, Silas?" Richard asked, gesturing across the heavy mahogany table. I picked up the small ceramic pitcher, set it near his saucer, and then reached into my leather satchel resting on the floor. I pulled out the manila envelope and placed it squarely in the center of the table, directly on top of the lace runner. The conversation faltered. Elena glanced at the envelope, her brow furrowing slightly. "What's that, honey? Insurance forms." "No," I said. My voice was eerily calm, devoid of the tremor I had expected. "It's a timeline." Richard chuckled uncertainly. "A timeline for what? You planning a vacation already?" I looked directly at Elena. The ambient warmth of the room seemed to evaporate. "It's a timeline of the last 10 months. Accompanied by a genetic profile." Elena's face did not merely drop, it shattered. The faint pink flush of the wine drained from her cheeks in an instant, leaving her skin the color of old parchment. Her eyes locked onto the envelope as if it were a live grenade. She didn't reach for it. She didn't ask what I meant. Her absolute paralysis was the most damning confession I could have witnessed. "I don't understand," Martha murmured, her gaze darting between us. "It's quite simple, Martha," I said, my tone conversational, though my heart was hammering a relentless rhythm against my ribs. The child sleeping in your living room is beautiful, he is innocent, but he is not my son, he never was. Silence descended upon the dining room, a thick, suffocating vacuum that swallowed all sound. Richard's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. Silas, that is a horrific thing to say, Richard breathed, his voice dangerously low. You cannot make an accusation like that without. I'm not making an accusation, Richard. I'm delivering a test result, read it. I slid the envelope toward him. He tore it open with clumsy, aggressive fingers, scanning the top page. I watched his eyes track back and forth, searching for the loophole, the error, the misunderstanding. He found none. He looked up, his expression a chaotic mix of rage and devastation, and turned to his daughter. Elena, he demanded, his voice cracking. Elena, tell me this is a mistake. She didn't look at him. She stared at her lap, her knuckles white as she gripped the fabric of her dress. I was scared, she whispered, a fragile, pathetic sound that offered no defense. It was my ex, before Silas. I didn't know for sure until it was too late, and Silas was so happy. I just wanted us to be happy. She tried to reach out to place a hand over mine, but I pulled away. The gesture wasn't dramatic, it was an act of preservation. I stood up, smoothing the front of my shirt, feeling a strange, weightless liberation. I wanted to be loved, Elena, I said quietly, ensuring every word carried its full weight. But not like this. Not as a utility. I didn't stay for the ensuing screaming match between father and daughter. I walked out the front door, the crisp autumn air hitting my face like a baptism. I left the car for her, ordering a rideshare from the curb. Watching the taillights of passing cars blur in the evening mist, I realized the most painful truth of all. I was complicit in my own destruction. I had allowed my desperate need for her affection to override my logic, my boundaries, and my self-respect. The divorce was swift and surgical. I moved into a sparse, sunlit apartment across town. I didn't fight for custody of a child that wasn't mine, though the thought of little Leo occasionally brings a sharp, phantom ache to my chest. He is collateral damage in a war of deception, and I hope truly that he grows up feeling loved. But I had to save myself. We romanticize unconditional love, but love without conditions is just a hostage situation. It's a dangerous myth that teaches us to endure betrayal in the name of loyalty. Good love, the kind that builds a life rather than draining it, requires rigid boundaries. It demands personal responsibility. It insists that you face the consequences of your actions, rather than drafting someone else to pay your debts. I spent 10 years confusing subservience with romance. I learned the hard way that if you do not fiercely protect your own dignity, no one else will do it for you. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever found yourself sacrificing your own boundaries for someone who only saw you as a convenience, let this be your wake-up call. Don't wait for the DNA test. Don't wait for the ultimate betrayal. Stand your ground now. Hit the like button to support the channel, subscribe for more true stories about the harsh realities of relationships, and leave a comment below. Have you ever ignored red flags just to keep someone in your life? Let's talk about it in the comments, and until next time, protect your peace.